Okay, moving on to the business of the day, opportunity to address the commission by employees or others. We have someone here, I believe, who'd like to speak. Mr. Dan Sullivan with the Civil Service League.
Thank you.
Mr. Dan is here today to kind of clarify some of the notification protocols and just kind of tell us what the Civil Service League is about. We are working to get in compliance and to follow the protocols of the other civil service agencies within the state. Mr. Sullivan chairs a group called the Civil Service League. I'm just going to let you expand on that if you don't mind.
Yeah. Louisiana Civil Service League is a statewide nonprofit educational organization founded in 1940, at the same time the original civil service law was written. Civil service was abolished in 1948 when Earl Long became governor, and in 1952 was put into the Constitution when Bob Kennan was elected. It stayed in existence until 1972 when Edwin Edwards called a Constitutional Convention and put civil service back into the Constitution, basically as it was originally written in 1940, with a few major changes, but the concept was there. Back in 1991, or 1990 actually, the state police felt they wanted a system of their own. They went to the legislature and lobbied the legislature to have them removed from state civil service, to have them removed from the State Civil Service Commission, and to set up a system for roughly 900 state employees who were the state troopers. That system went into existence in 1991. At that time, we were very involved, as we have been for many years, in advising the setup of civil service systems. We've established over 20 different civil service systems in Louisiana, including the original law. Obviously, I wasn't there when the original law was written, but I was there at the Constitutional Convention in 1972. So the system needed to be set up. What they wanted it to do, and in order to get it passed, they wanted to mirror what the State Civil Service Commission had. So basically what they did was they set up a law which was identical to the State Civil Service Commission and the State Civil Service setup, and just for the state troopers. And they did. The setup of the commission was identical, and the other things were the same as they were, and they're constitutionally protected. At the time of the setup in 1991, I believe there were 8 congressional districts until 1993, when that was reduced to 7, and then in 2013 that was reduced to 6. So one of the stipulations of this act is that each member, as it is at the State Civil Service Commission, each member must serve from a separate congressional district, and then there's an elected employee also, which is the 7th member. About, I don't know, in the last 6, 8, 10 months, I read in the paper that there were some vacancies on the State Police Commission, and the governor was waiting to figure out who he was going to appoint. Well, I called your past director and explained to her what I'd like to see from the commission. I'd like to see what letters were sent asking for names from the college presidents, the university presidents in the state, asking them for the names. I was told that she couldn't supply that information to me. I needed to call the lawyer Taylor Townsend in Natchitoches. I got no response from him initially. I went through the Public Records Act and I requested it from him and from your director, and as did the advocate after I contacted him. At that point, Mr. Townsend contacted me and told me that he would write me a letter. He did. He said, we have no records of ever writing any university presidents. I asked for them since 2005, and they had no records. I had records up until that time. Since we were involved in establishing the original commission, I met with the university presidents, told them about the new act, the new law that was in the Constitution, told them what their responsibilities were, that they needed to submit 3 names when a vacancy occurred. Initially, every one of the universities submitted 3 names because you were setting up a new commission. Each member of the initial commission served for, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, or however it was set up. And then it went back on track again where the university, when there was a vacancy, each university that was involved, if Joe Smith was from Tulane, then Tulane was contacted when that vacancy came up to submit 3 names to the governor, and the governor must choose one of those names. If not, the top names are automatically appointed. Anyway, at that point, when I realized there was no information in the files, I brought my files up here and gave them to Lenore Feeney, which is went back to establish how this thing began and the, I guess, the line of the different presidents, which this department had, because I saw it on their website a couple of weeks before my meeting, and then it was removed for some reason. So it was not on the website anymore.
If I could ask you a question.
Yes.
Who was in that meeting when you came and met with them?
Just Ms. Feeney and Mr. Dawes, that was it. Cathy Derbonne, I'm sorry, and some lady walked in that worked here for just a moment or two, and Cathy Derbonne certainly was here because that's the first time I had met her, and she was helpful at that point after she said there was no information. I told Lenore that I said, well, actually, these appointments were made in an unconstitutional manner. However, because there was a waiting period once the governor did not get the names, that these people were on the commission were probably legally seated on the commission. So we answered that question. But anyway, I said in the future, when there's a vacancy on the commission, this is what you need to do. Ms. Derbonne agreed to that. Lenore agreed to that, and that was the meeting we had that day. We probably had a meeting for maybe an hour and a half or something. It was pouring down, raining, and very hard to get back and forth. But that was it, and that's where we stand. I've kept in touch with Lenore, and TJ called me one day and said, if we have a vacancy, I will certainly contact you and let you help with the letter and so forth. There was a vacancy that came up in the last several weeks. They contacted me. I got them in touch with State Civil Service, and I sent them a letter, the type of letter State Civil Service sends, outlining what needs to be done to the university. Loyola University was contacted. They are in the process of coming up with 3 names from the 5th Congressional District, which is the district involved. There was something that someone told me about that was on a website, which I think Louisiana Voice is the name of it, and someone who wrote that blog was concerned that the reason it needed to be someone up by Centenary, Louisiana College. That initially was the concept. When we started out with eight congressional districts and we had 6 commissioners, the initial idea was Louisiana College would get somebody from Alexandria, at that time the 8th Congressional District, or Centenary would get somebody from Shreveport, or Tulane and Loyola. Well, actually, you have 4 in New Orleans, but all of those would try to get somebody near there. Well, with resignations and vacancies running out and so forth and so on, just like the State Civil Service Commission, sometimes Tulane University will have to choose somebody from the Shreveport area. I mean, it's just, that's the way it happens over a period of time. Theirs went into effect in 1974, and yours went into effect in 1991. So that's where we stand, and that's how the appointments are supposed to be made. In the Constitution, it says, and it's as clear as it can be, that a vacancy for any cause shall be filled by appointment or election in accordance with the procedure of law governing the original appointment or election and from the same source. So whatever university is involved with nominating the individual, or should have nominated, even though the governor might have made the appointments, whatever position that individual's in, when his vacancy runs out or he resigns, then you go to the university with the lineage that came from the original one. I spoke to a young lady, maybe it was you, I spoke to someone on the phone about the 5th Congressional District, and they were able to trace it back to the original appointment, which I brought all my files that we had copies of all the letters from 1991 on. It seems that this process, you had a director that was arrested, I believe, back in the, sometime in 2000 something, maybe 5, 6, 7, I don't remember. And then Ms. Derbonne took over, and I asked her why this process had not been followed, and she told me that, first of all, she said, well, we need to send letters to all the universities. I said, no, that's not the way it works. Initially, when they set it up, that was it, but only one university gets it. And then she told me that she had not been told to do this, so that's why she had not done it. She had strictly contacted boards and commissions and bypassed the universities. And I said, well, I understand that, but the Constitution says this is what you need to do. And she says, in the future, I will do that. So that was my last conversation with her. I understand she's now gone. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
So as we sit here now, you were copied on the letter. That was the correct college?
That
we're
is
doing this
correct.
properly?
That was correct. As far as I was able to ascertain. As I say, nothing's been done since before 2005, but it looks like that was it, yes. And Loyola should submit 3 names to you. I called them today and I left a message for the guy that handles it for Father Wiles and told them it was imperative they get those names in whenever they could. The way, you might say, well, how in the world can the University of New Orleans figure out?
3 people up there.
I'm sorry?
No, how can the college in New Orleans
Right.
know 3 qualified people
I'll
up
tell you,
in
it's really very
that
simple.
area?
And I started this process years ago. It's really simple. When a letter is sent from you or from the State Civil Service Department to that, they send the zip codes that are involved in the congressional district. I suggested to the university president that he take those zip codes, run his alumni records, and come up with their alumni, because they have alumni all over the state. So what they do is they get an alumni list of those zip codes. 5th congressional district that we're dealing with here is all the way from Shreveport through Alexandria. So it's a huge congressional district. I mean, it's spread out. I think it even goes to the Felicianas or the Florida parishes or whatever. So what they do is they just run their zip codes of their alumni files, and they come up with names and go through them and figure out who they know and who they can contact. They look at their biographical information, and the individual, first of all, cannot be political. They can't enter in any political activities. They cannot make political contributions. I think you had a problem on this commission with that. I know I had a problem with the New Orleans Commission a couple of years ago where 2 members had made a contribution, and they're no longer on there. But they didn't resign, but the terms ran out, and they actually retracted the contributions with the Ethics Commission. So that's how they get the names, and that's where they come from, or they don't necessarily have to nominate someone that is from their university, but that's the easiest way to do it, and 9 times out of 10 that's done. The times that's probably not done wouldn't deal with you, but I've set up civil service systems in St. Charles, St. John, a lot of parishes in Louisiana, like that, and they use university presidents that are not even near where they are. And so what they may do at that point is contact people they know and nominate somebody or appoint somebody from that area or from that parish or whatever it may be that they know of, and not necessarily a university graduate or alumna from that area.
I just had one other question.
Sure.
After your meeting with them about the letters, several of us, or if not all of us, received phone calls from Lenore and Kathy trying to explain the situation. Were you in there during those phone calls?
No, I left right after the meeting.
Okay.
And went back to New Orleans.
I was just curious because the way it's explained now makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, I wasn't. I mean, I don't remember any calls being. I don't even know. I mean, there was no phone calls made at all while I was in there. I didn't even know there was a phone in there. But there was. I mean, the only people, as I say, were involved was Cathy Derbonne and Lenore and TJ, and I think another person that worked here walked in and brought some information to us, and that was it. I didn't see her talk to anybody else.
I was just curious.
That's the first time I'd ever been up here. Yeah.
I guess my last question, if you don't mind, based on the protocols that we're following, are we in compliance with the other civil service entities in the way that we're doing the posting for this position?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. For what position?
Well, just the vacant position on the.
I can't answer that. I don't deal with that. I think you'd have to talk to State Civil Service on that. I can't address that end of it.
Well, just on the notification to the university, the letter.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about your director.
No. I'm talking about the appointment.
Of course, yes.
Okay.
You've done it perfectly. And matter of fact, I sent you a sample letter. I think Lenore helped you with that, and you basically wrote the same letter, but to a different university and a different part of the Constitution. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Absolutely, you're right in compliance with the Constitution on what you're doing. Yes. What's that?
You're doing something right.
That's right, right.
Does anyone have any further questions?
Thank you for your time.
Sure, glad to help. And please feel free to call on me anytime you need me. That's what I'm here for.
Don't tell dogs that, because we'll call you every day.
Glad to help in any way I can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir.
Be safe going back.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes.
I guess one of the unique aspects of being a blogger is that I can step away from the camera and participate, and that's what I'm going to choose to do today. what I'd like to relay is that I have extensively covered two other situations where, not identical circumstances, but very close, one being Murphy Painter, the other being Corey Delahousse, and the litigation expenses on defending that are through the roof in both cases. And my thought on this, I mean, clearly the office must be functioning right now. I think for your own protection, given, I mean, I know everybody's tiptoed around it and said this may happen. Let's face it, this board's going to be sued. Okay, that's the bottom line of this commission. I mean, there's just no way it's not going to happen. That's why I'm not going to tiptoe around it. And I believe that given that scenario, it would at least behoove the commission, given that the circumstances under which this happened, and that being that, you know, there was whistleblowing activity, and the circumstances under which this happened, I think that that potential litigation may be able to be avoided by, I know Mr. Braxton's not here, I thought he was going to be here today, but I think his suggestion may have had merit, that offering that back to her or in some other capacity with this commission to cover yourselves, because I'm going to tell you, it's one thing to think litigation might happen, it's going to happen here. And so for the board to knowingly go forward under these circumstances, I think, I mean, as a taxpayer, and that's what I'm speaking of, the $70,000 that's on this other deal, that's going to be minor compared to the litigation expenses that's going to be involved with what goes here. So I'm just saying, I would really wonder why the attorney wouldn't advise this. Make that option available. If she declines it, that's sure going to put y'all on much more solid ground, because, you know, I mean, the Corey Delahousse thing is now with the First Circuit, but I mean, they've had 3 or 4 peremptory exceptions. Murphy Painters has dragged on for 6 years, and it's not just the dollar amount for the litigation expenses. We're talking about an enormous amount of time for people that are going to be called into depositions. I mean, it's just going to end up being a quagmire that's going to drag on probably through the duration of this administration. So, you know, I don't know if you want to, he just addressed that pretty authoritatively, so I don't guess there's any need to ask for an Attorney General's opinion about your status, because I think you made that pretty clear. But from my own vantage point, speaking as a taxpayer who has covered these extensive trial hearings, and I don't miss a one for either one of these individuals, I already know that I'm going to have to be doing more.
Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, I apologize. Robert Burns, Sound Off, Louisiana publisher. And I apologize, I should have done that at the outset, and I guess I also took it for granted. People know me now, and that may not be a good assumption. But that's just me speaking as a taxpayer. You're welcome. As you know, I do a video blog. I have repeatedly lambasted the amount of litigation expenses involved, both for Delahousse and for Painter, because Painter's is well over $1 million now. Now his situation was a little different, but it's a lot of money. Delahousse's, now that the peremptory exception was denied, and I don't see the First Circuit overturning it, you know, his are going to become quite extensive, and this stuff just drags on for years. So that's my thought for my 2 cents of what it's worth. I would want to go back to her and say either your old position or some other position to try to alleviate all that, because it's going to add up. And I know everybody's tiptoed around it. I'm not a believer in tiptoeing. You know, I say things straight up, and, you know, I don't try to, you know, dance around an issue. And I don't think anybody in this room probably is of the opinion that this commission is not going to be sued. And I just think that when you know it's going to happen, can take a preventive measure for the protection of this body, as well as the taxpayer resources that would be devoted to that litigation. If she turns it down, then I'd say, well, we offered it back to you, you know. That's just my thought. I appreciate y'all allowing me to express those sentiments, and I will now return behind the camera and not have another word to say. And I think y'all are very professional. I cover several other commissions and boards. They hate to see me speak. Y'all have always been very, I know I've only been here 2 or 3 meetings. Y'all have been shown the utmost of courtesy. Trust me, that does not happen at a couple of other boards that I'm at. So I just want to thank y'all for your courtesy, your professionalism, whether you liked what I said or not, I appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to say it. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion.
Any further comments? Before we move on in the agenda, I wanted to go back to some statements made Monday by Commissioner Braxton, calling into question the validity of the meeting and the resignation of Mr. Grafton. You know, he brought up several points, and we couldn't say yes or no at that time, and we actually researched all the statements that he made. Myself, Ms. Manzella researched them as well independently, and I actually asked Ms. Feeney to research them as well. Ultimately, the decision or the rulings that we found said that a resignation does not have to be in writing from a board or commission. It only has to be in writing and notarized if you're an elected official. Actually, what I want to do is I want to let you expand on it because you did probably the most research and really went further than I did. But would you mind explaining what we found in the research?
Well, we contacted Secretary of State, contacted the Office of the Governor of Boards and Commissions, and the Governor's Office, and asked all of those entities if a public resignation required a written resignation as well in order to be made effective. And we were advised that only an elected position requires a written resignation submitted to the Secretary of State. And that in our case, that would be if the trooper representative, who is elected and not nominated, if he quit or resigned, he would have to submit a written resignation notarized to the Secretary of State. All three entities told us no, that was not required, that it was a public resignation, and that it was in effect. So that was the information we learned after the meeting.
Anybody have any questions on that? I just wanted to make sure we are in compliance, and that was what ultimately we unanimously heard, was that it does not have to be in writing unless you're an elected official.
Okay.
So, any further comments? Okay, moving on to the next order of business. Consideration of employment applications for the position of Executive Director and determination of which of those applicants to interview. I'm going to move this table forward like we discussed last time. That way we can sit across from each other.
No.
And that way, if y'all don't mind, y'all.
I think it's great because the lighting is, I've never been able to solve it on this side.
So,
You don't want us on camera.
You've gotten me enough.
I'm just going to have the table up here so that we can work across from each other and hand each other applications.
Is that right?
I didn't think you're moving the
Thank you
table
for
for
telling
nothing.
me.
Come on now.
Thank you.
I got it.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Is this a bank? It's not a bank, is it, right? You can't use the damn orders, right?
No more shadowy figures.
Did you want one of the solid chairs or you want one of these rolling chairs?
I don't care.
This is
What are you trying to say?
fun being the elder statesman, isn't it?
You're right. Your day is coming. Believe me. I hope so.
Me too.
Okay?
I want to grab me something. Would y'all like anything?
No, thank you. You want something to drink?
I'll take some water if it's a,
Bring a water.
now I know y'all are content with me.
Boy, it's a beautiful day to drive up.
No, it's not.
Man, one day I'd come here and the damn trucks.
Well, is that yours?
And you can have it. I haven't finished my other one.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna turn it down because I am thirsty, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Last chance.
No.
Okay.
I've got more than half of it left.
Well, thank you.
Who would like to start?
Ladies first.
Well, how do we want to just
I guess we could just start with the expansion, who your top 5 are, and then as we go around, we can just kind of express, you know, no, we'll just make a list, and there may be some overlap.
So what I did, because last time I think we all decided no less than 3, no more than 5.
Yeah.
So, I have a 5th one, but that, it was only a cheap 5. So I have, Jason Hanneman, Jacqueline Cummings, Tara LeBlanc, and Thomas Jarlock.
I'm only moving closer for audio purposes, if that's it.
That's,
Y'all have to forgive me, all I got was the Jason Hanneman, Jacqueline Cummings, who's with the next 2?
Tara LeBlanc and Thomas Jarlock.
Don't want to go ahead. I have almost the same as she's got. I've got Hanneman, Cummins, LeBlanc, Tara LeBlanc, and I got Vogel. That's all. I gotta find one more. I haven't decided yet.
Okay, so
If we're
you,
doing 5, I had Vogel as well.
okay, so you,
Or Michael Vogel.
Michael Vogel.
can you repeat who you had, Shannon?
All right, Cummings, Hanneman,
Okay.
LeBlanc, Tara LeBlanc,
Okay,
Vogel, as the 4, yeah.
okay.
I'm,
What was Vogel's first name?
Michael Vogel.
All right, so, there we go.
In no order. James Cook.
I can't hear from him.
Yeah, that's why I moved it closer. Y'all might want to do a little,
Put,
A little emphasis on.
yeah.
put Griffin down as my 5th one.
Griffin?
Yeah, Christie.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so James Cook, Thomas Jarlock, Tara LeBlanc, Jacqueline Cummings, Jason Hanneman.
Mine weren't in order, but, I'd only done a top 3.
Mine weren't in order either, by the way.
And, this, I just did a top 3 to keep it simple, and mine were Jacqueline Cummings, Michael Vogel, and Jason Hanneman. So Vogel and Cummings. So, trying to see if we have any overlap. I see,
We gotta have overlap.
yeah, I mean, that narrowed it down to 7 names. I only see Christy Griffin under the sheriff's pile. James Cook is only under your pile. We have 2 for Michael Vogel, 4 for Jason Hanneman, 4 for Jacqueline Cummins. Tara LeBlanc's got 3. So the top 3 right now are Jason Hanneman, Jacqueline Cummins, and Tara LeBlanc. The next 2 with 2 would be Thomas Jarlock, Mike Vogel. So do y'all want to just start going through? Let me go through. Thomas Jarlock.
Which one are we going to?
Oh, yeah,
You're trying to whittle down to a certain.
that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Today, you're just trying to whittle down to a certain number for interviews. Is
Yeah,
that-
absolutely.
That's what we did.
I'm just trying, there's only 7 names total, so there was only 7 names that we actually all 4 came up with. So I figured, how many do we want?
How many, that's what I was gonna ask, how many do we wanna do, you know, face-to-face interviews with? Are we trying to get, are we gonna take all 7? Do you wanna go to 5? Do we wanna go to 3? What's the game plan? I mean, if
I defer to y'all because you run a business with hundreds of employees and you've been sheriff of an agency, police chief, marshal. How many would you interview for a position?
All 7?
All seven?
I would too. I mean, you know, if I see something I like in one of them that necessarily y'all didn't,
And
you
you
know,
might
I'm-
catch
you might change your mind during,
Yeah, you might
during the
catch something
interview,
in
and y'all go,
interviews.
wow, you know, I would hate to preclude one of the seven
Yeah.
simply because, you know, I might have seen something different than y'all did.
Go with that. I don't have no issue with interviewing 7 people. And if we're gonna do, I believe we set the meeting Friday for 1 o'clock.
I don't think we have said it, have we?
Yeah,
We have?
1 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
That's what you gave me.
I did?
I was thinking when we left, because we were trying to look at available times, that 1 o'clock was the time we.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, and as far as conducting the interviews, I mean, do y'all have any, Lenore, do you have any guidance as far as conducting the interviews?
Well, the most important thing is we have to pick the times of when each of these people will be interviewed right now, because they have to be given notice of their right to have their interview in executive session or in open meeting, so that they have, so that's 24 hours ahead of time. So, so we need to just make sure that we today set times for each of those interviews, and whether you want to do 30 minutes for each interview or less is up to you, but you've got to put the time for each individual.
That's what I was gonna ask, is how long we're gonna give each time. You've recently been through the interview process?
Well, yes, but that was an hour and a half.
Wow,
Yeah.
let's not do that.
I mean, the second two were about 30 minutes each.
Or is everybody good with 30 minutes?
I'd say 30, if we
I
do
think
30 minutes
is
each,
reasonable.
that would put us doing finishing the last interview at 4:30.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to tell these people too how long they have. You know what I'm saying? I don't want them walking in thinking they're gonna be here for a 10-minute interview. We're expecting them to be there for 30, and then they feel like they didn't come prepared enough or bring their A game.
Absolutely. All right, so we're gonna interview all 7, starting at 1 o'clock.
Can you go through the list again? just
Yeah,
so I can
please.
make sure I have the right stuff?
Yeah, and y'all double check, make sure I got everybody y'all listed, because I was trying to write while y'all were talking. Jason Hanneman,
Wait.
and I just wrote them in the order that y'all listed them out, so that's, I mean, it doesn't have to be the order of interview. Jacqueline Cummings, Tara LeBlanc,
Wait a minute.
I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna show it to you. I'm gonna hand them to you so you can see it. That's what I'm trying to do is get.
I'm sorry, he's going through the files, finding the files, you're writing them down. Go ahead, all right, the next one's gonna be Jacqueline Cummings, go ahead and write it down, make sure I got it right.
All right.
Next one's gonna be Tara LeBlanc.
TARA, right?
Yes, sir. That's gonna be Thomas Jarlock. Then there's gonna be Michael Vogel. Then James Cook. And Christy Griffin.
Griffin, right?
Yes, sir.
GRIFFIN.
Something, I can't afford a nice Ford job. Am I all loose?
I'll bring you a box of
Why
folders.
don't you, Rob? You can afford it.
Allegedly. Yes, sir, I did.
So the order would it just be alphabetical?
Well,
The best way to keep it, you can't get in trouble that way.
Exactly.
I was just gonna say, if somebody had a conflict on time or something, you know
Well,
what I'm
that's
saying?
understandable.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, allow
But
them
it's
to.
alphabetical order.
Well, we can initially say alphabetical,
Okay.
and then if somebody has a conflict, we can switch them with the next
Yeah,
perfect.
person on the
Yeah,
list.
Perfect. And I know we only have
And you want the first one starting at 1?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
Tell y'all something, this is a long time and I read so much. My God. I used to have people to read all this for me. When are we gonna get together, Nora, what you talking about? You remember?
I'm sorry?
When are we gonna get together, what you talked to me about?
Okay. Mr. Rowe had asked me about whether or not we would have, I could advise the commission on do's and don'ts
Yeah,
about things that
What
you
questions
can and
we
cannot
can
ask in interviews. And so I have drafted a list. I don't have it here with me, but I was going to bring it to the next meeting so that you would know what, and if you need it emailed ahead of time, I'm happy to do that. It's just the basic employment laws to make sure that you don't ask questions about personal things that you should not ask.
About the age?
Yeah, age would be a no-no.
Always a problem with age, huh?
What's that?
Don't get old, yeah.
No, I'll do my best.
All right, so we're gonna let them know today though, right?
Yeah, I'd say
As
we,
much time as we can.
Yeah.
Now, when
That's a good
is
idea.
the background?
They can start making plans.
would you mind being in charge of doing the contacting the references?
Sure.
And, just,
Oh, we got that on Friday?
We want it done before Friday?
yes.
I'd like to, just because, you know,
Yeah, if we could get it done before Friday, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all right, then what are we gonna do? Each come up with some questions?
I say, if we do a list of questions, if y'all want to send me the questions you want to ask, I'll compile them into a Word document, and then I will forward them to Lenore, and make sure none
Make
of
sure
them,
none of them
yeah,
are
none of them
illegal.
violate anything.
That sounds like a plan.
And, I mean, because to me, if we go through a list, if we've got a list of questions, that way we ask them in the same order and make sure they're all proper, cover all of
Then
it.
send us a copy of this.
Absolutely, and I'll give everybody a copy of the questions that you can take notes of today,
Yeah.
and that way we can, make shorthand notes or whatever as the interview is going on. If that works for everyone else. So, anything
Any
further?
other suggestions?
I think that covers it.
Okay, so,
So somebody's gonna call all of the applicants and let them know.
You need something?
Once you have the
No,
time
I was
to
looking
log
for- I was
in,
looking for
start
something.
that process.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah, so we
You
have.
may have a
Damn
conflict
car.
right about you
Your
wanna start.
glasses, they're on.
You wanna sign the times right now.
Oh,
yeah, as soon as the meeting adjourns, we'll start making the phone calls
Yeah.
and scheduling it. And then once we have a schedule of the times, I'll send that out to all the board members so that they'll know the rank of order. In the meantime, if y'all could create a list of questions that we verify, instead of sending them to me, why don't we just send them directly to Ms. Feeney so that she can.
Okay,
You know,
and I'll compile it.
There's no reason to have a middleman in that process.
Now, when are we gonna get them?
I'm sorry.
When are we gonna get these questions?
As soon as you finish sending them to me, I'll put them in, it won't take me long to put them in one document, and then I'll send them right back out.
Okay.
Anything else? Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
So we'll come in at 1 o'clock, ready to go. All right.
Ms. Feeney, anything else that we've
Nope,
missed?
not that I know of.
All right, any further comment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it, meeting adjourned.